Welcome everyone, I'm Spiro, thanks for tuning in. We are currently witnessing an unprecedented global lockdown in response to the coronavirus, known as COVID-19, or otherwise known as COVID-1984. Now, I'm not going to go over the numbers here of the infected, the death, the recovered. You can go to your television for that. Instead, we're going to be looking at what the media fails to report on time and time again, and we're going to start with Henry Kissinger, who just authored an article that was published on April 3rd, 2020, titled, "The Coronavirus Pandemic Will Forever Alter the World Order." In this opinion piece, Kissinger references past lessons learned from the Marshall Plan and from the Manhattan Project, and from that he outlines 3 domains he says the U.S. needs to implement. Number 1, Kissinger says, we need to develop new techniques and technologies for infection control and commensurate vaccines across large populations. So straight away, Kissinger calls for vaccinating large populations. Now, his second domain proposes healing the world economy, and the third is to safeguard the liberal world order. All 3 of which he says the U.S. must do. And in other words, I'm going to translate this for you. The U.S. needs to mass vaccinate. The U.S. must transition into this new digital financial system, and which we'll get into more here shortly. But the U.S. and thirdly, the U.S. must embrace the liberal world order. And for those of you who are wondering, the very definition of the word liberal is open to new behavior or opinions and willing to discard traditional values. So in other words, a new world order. Now, Kissinger isn't the only one who has been calling for global governance. The former Prime Minister of the UK, Gordon Brown, recently urged world leaders to create a, quote, temporary form of global governance to tackle the twin medical and economic crises, calling for a global governance task force, which would include the G20, the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. And item number 1 on this proposed global governance task force would be to find a vaccine and begin production immediately. Now, just to be clear, I'm not anti-vaccine, I'm not opposed to vaccines, and I'm not here to push some anti-vaccine conspiracy theory. I believe in medical freedom, and people should have the right to decide for themselves what they believe is best for them and their families. Now, this was actually established during the Nuremberg trials and became known as the Nuremberg Code, which determined that people have the basic human right to informed consent and cannot have medication forced upon them. Now, I personally am very skeptical of the modern medical system, which was taken over by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and was reshaped with the creation of the American Medical Association. I've interviewed top doctors and nurses, and I believe that it is a corrupt system at its core because the modern medical system doesn't care. They're not interested in creating cures. They're interested in repeat customers. So I'm going to leave a link below to an extremely important interview I did about 2 or 3 years ago with a top medical doctor covering toxic ingredients often found in vaccines, the revolving door between the drug and vaccine manufacturers and government regulatory agencies, and much, much more. The report is titled, "Prominent Doctor Lifts Veil of Secrecy on Vaccines and Pharmaceutical Industries." Now, this will give you a better idea on the safety and efficacy of vaccines from a top doctor, not my opinion, not my perspective. Now, this is critical information to have, especially right now, considering the fact that they can't even get the tests right for the coronavirus. So how are we supposed to believe that they're going to get the vaccine right, especially considering the fact that this is admittedly the most rushed into production vaccine in history? These are questions, legitimate questions that people should be asking. Now, this brings us to Bill Gates, who also stated he believes the world needs global government. I'll leave a link below to this article where Gates also not only talks about global government and how it's needed to oversee global health initiatives and compliance, but also to oversee government adoption of digital currencies. Now, Bill Gates recently stepped down from Microsoft so he can focus on philanthropy full time. Gates has also teamed up with Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg to, of course, help save the world and fund COVID-19 treatments, then research into that. Also, Madonna has stepped up and says she wants to join in this action. But they have a lot of catching up to do. Bill Gates has been in the game for a while. And a lot of people have been asking, how has this nerd, Bill Gates, all of a sudden calling the shots, running the show? He's all of a sudden the world's top expert, and he's everywhere, and he's saying that that we need to lock down the entire country and the whole planet. Now, we know that his foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, partnered with Johns Hopkins and the World Economic Forum to host Event 201, which was a simulation of a global coronavirus outbreak 6 weeks before the actual coronavirus outbreak took place, which I covered in detail and will provide a link below. Just in case you haven't seen it, it is an absolute must-watch. Gates also had a TED Talk back in 2015 where he warned of a global pandemic that is a much greater threat than a nuclear war.
When I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement, filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes.
Now, to provide a little bit more clarity into exactly how and why Bill Gates wields so much influence, not only here in the United States, but globally, I wanted to share with you this mainstream article from Politico. Now, this is not some kooky conspiracy site, okay? This is a very mainstream publication, and it's titled, "Meet the World's Most Powerful Doctor, Bill Gates." Now, just to be clear, Bill Gates is not actually a doctor, but I'm going to read a few very telling excerpts from this article. And the very first sentence of this article is, "Some billionaires are satisfied with buying themselves an island. Bill Gates got a United Nations Health Agency in Geneva." The very first paragraph reads, "Over the past decade, the world's richest man has become the World Health Organization's second biggest donor, second only to the United States, and just above the United Kingdom. This largesse gives him outsized influence over its agenda, one that could grow as the US and the UK threaten to cut funding if the agency doesn't make a better investment case." And this article is from 2017, which is significant, and I want you to remember that date, 2017. But what could possibly be a better investment case than a global health pandemic? Exactly what Gates was warning of in his 2015 TED Talk. So right out of the gate, the mainstream Political article is saying that Bill Gates basically bought the World Health Organization, which of course falls under the United Nations. Now, a few more very interesting points from this article before we move on. Not only was Gates the first ever private individual to keynote a WHO's General Assembly of member countries, his Gates Foundation, despite the protest from 30 health advocacy groups due to conflicts of interest, was granted official relations status with the WHO. Unprecedented. Now, this article quoted 16 different people, and most would only speak on the condition of anonymity because of how powerful and influential Gates is. And they all pretty much expressed concern regarding how influential Gates had become over the UN body, stating things like, quote, "He is treated like a head of state, not only at the WHO, but also at the G20, end quote. That was a Geneva-based NGO representative calling Gates one of the most influential men in global health. Now, the article also details how influential Gates was in selecting the new head of the WHO, despite the fact that Gates had no legal vote in the matter because only member nations could vote, and since Bill Gates is not yet his own country, he couldn't vote, but his old buddy Tedros, whom Gates had worked with in the past and was exposed for covering up outbreaks in the past, got the job and is the current WHO head. Now, the article, it really is a must-read. There's a lot of very important information and quotes in there from people from the WHO and as well as the Council on Foreign Relations. But what is even more revealing is the fact that Bill Gates, who stands to profit immensely from this crisis, was pounding the drum very early on, for the World Health Organization to declare the coronavirus a pandemic, a global pandemic. But the WHO did not officially declare it a pandemic until literally the day after Bill Gates made a very large donation to a cause that directly financially benefited the World Health Organization by funding treatment programs that were partnered with the WHO. And then the day after, the WHO declared a global health pandemic, freeing up not only an extremely vast amounts of money that would most likely eventually make its way back to the Gates Foundation through his many philanthropic endeavors, but also allows governments much more power, especially to use the global health emergency as justification to lock everything and everyone down, which is, of course, crashing the global economy so the banksters and the governments can essentially take ownership through these bailouts and loans. Not to mention that Gates is also buying up large ownerships of companies right now on the stock exchange. Now, I personally think that they want people to become desperate enough to accept things that they would never otherwise accept. Now, it certainly looks like we are seeing a perfect storm as the police have announced that they are no longer going to be enforcing many crimes, while at the same time, they've been threatening to arrest people who violate social distancing orders, and even more absurdly, doing all of this while releasing actual criminals from jail. This looks like the perfect storm is brewing. Now, I will leave links as always, but I'm going to move on to Gates' influence here in the U.S. Now, I'm sure that many of you have seen Dr. Deborah Birx on TV. She is a White House coronavirus response team member. Birx Deborah Birx on TV. She is a White House coronavirus response team member. Birx was appointed by former President Barack Obama to serve as the United States Global AIDS Coordinator. She also sits on the board of a group that has received billions of dollars from the Gates Foundation, and Birx reportedly used a disputed Bill Gates-funded model for the White House's coronavirus efforts. Bill Gates not only funded the model, but he funded the institute behind it, and Gates also pays the salary of the director he handpicked to lead the, quote, study. Now, this study is being used as justification to lock down the entire country, a move that Bill Gates has repeatedly emphasized he believes needed to happen.
Do you think there should be a national policy?
Absolutely. As long as people are moving around within the country, we're all in this together. It's not likely we're going to partition the country into all sorts of separate pieces because things like food and electricity, there are essential functions where we still want people to be connected. So it'll help everyone get out of this more quickly and reduce the deaths and reduce the economic reduction if we implement these strong isolation measures on a countrywide basis. You know, it's really unprecedented. And, you know, we're kind of in uncharted territory about how we minimize the pain. Even the issue of once you get the case numbers down, there's a lot of dialogue between our foundation experts and the government now, but what does opening up look like? You know, which activities have, like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low?
Yeah.
And which activities, like mass gatherings, may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
So now we have an idea of who told Trump to shut it down.
It's a beautiful Friday in Washington, D.C., and our country's a great place, and we're getting better. We're getting better very quickly. This was artificially induced. We just said, they said, close it down. You have to close it down. We closed it down, and we're healing, and we're going to get it better fast. So, Mike, if you could come up, say a few words, please.
Now, we have also heard this echoed by the head of the NIH, Dr. Tony Fauci, who is also on the White House Coronavirus Task Force, who also has conflicts of interest connected to Bill Gates and Bill Gates' money. Not only did both Gates and Fauci both try to poo-poo the idea of a malaria drug called chloroquine, which could be used to treat the coronavirus, which would then, of course, pose a threat to the demand and profit margins of the vaccine manufacturers funded by Bill Gates. Additionally, the experimental RNA vaccine manufactured by Moderna is funded by both Bill Gates and the NIH, which Fauci leads. Now, this vaccine has been fast-tracked, removing regulatory restrictions, and this type of RNA vaccine has never been before used on humans and permanently alters your DNA by essentially reprogramming it. Now, typically vaccines take years to develop, not weeks. And they are already testing this brand new RNA vaccine on humans. Fauci's NIH are the ones conducting the vaccine test right now. And by the way, they skipped the usual animal testing phase and started testing on human guinea pigs. Now, Gates and Fauci also have another financial relationship. In October of 2019, Fauci announced a partnership between the Gates Foundation and Fauci's agency, in which they both pledged to spend $100 million each to research gene-based therapies into HIV and sickle cell disease. Now, on a side note, remember when Trump came into office, he said he was going to investigate vaccines because he allegedly has a son who may have been damaged by a vaccine. This was back in the days when everyone was saying Trump was going to drain the swamp. Well, some footage of Bill Gates has emerged where Gates appears to take credit for shutting that down.
So I saw him at Trump Tower. I said, hey, science and innovation is a great thing. You should be a leader who drives innovation. And that conversation was about a broad set of things in energy, in health, in education. Pick things you want to do that are big. HIV vaccine, you could, accelerate that. Be associated with innovation. And then the second time I saw him was the March after that, so March 2017 in the White House. In both of those two meetings, he asked me if vaccines weren't a bad thing, because he was considering a commission to look into ill effects of vaccines. And somebody, his name is Robert Kennedy Jr., was advising him that vaccines were causing bad things. And I said, no, that's a dead end. That would be a bad thing. Don't do that. Both times he wanted to know if there was a difference between HIV and HPV. So I was able to explain that those are rarely confused with each other.
Now, this might be a good time to remind everyone of another TED Talk where Bill Gates openly promoted population control.
I asked the top scientists in this several times, do we really have to get down to near zero? Can't we just, cut it in half or a quarter? And the answer is that until we get near to zero, the temperature will continue to rise. And so that's a big challenge. It's very different than saying, we're a 12-foot high truck trying to get under a 10-foot bridge and we can just sort of squeeze under. This is something that has to get to zero. Now, we put out a lot of carbon dioxide every year, over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Will somebody please explain to me how new vaccines will help to lower the population by perhaps 10 to 15%? And keep in mind, this RNA vaccine is a new vaccine that has never before been used in humans. Now, Bill Gates has been doing the rounds recently on a media campaign, beginning with a Reddit Ask Me Anything, where Gates called for a national tracking system for the coronavirus. Many were shocked, and some asked, did Gates slip up and let the cat out of the bag? And in my personal belief, the answer is no, because only a few days later, Gates upped the ante and openly called and talked about a vaccine certificate, which would be recognized internationally. So in other words, a global vaccine ID. These statements are not a slip of the tongue, in my opinion. This is a public rollout of a plan that has been in the works for a long time.
Eventually, what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world where you'll have some countries that won't have it under control. Sadly, you don't want to completely block off the ability for those people to go there and come back and move around.
Now, if you'd seen my previous reports here, you would not be surprised by this. I published a report before the announcements were made by Bill Gates, and I predicted that this would be the outcome and is very likely tied into Gates' coronavirus at-home testing kits because they are collecting your DNA during these tests. Now, I show in detail how Gates currently is working with the United Nations to establish the UN's Sustainable Development Goal 16.9 under the UN's 2030 agenda to provide a digital ID for every man, woman, and child on the planet by the year 2030 through their UN and Gates joint program known as ID 2020. I'm going to leave a link for that report. You can go check it out. It ties everything together into this report as well. Now, Gates openly is talking about vaccinating everybody on the planet.
Of all the vaccine constructs, the 7 most promising of those, even though we'll end up picking at most 2 of them, we're going to fund factories for all 7. And just so that we don't waste time in serially saying, okay, which vaccine works, and then building the factory. Because to get to the best case that people like myself and Dr. Fauci are saying is about 18 months, we need to do safety and efficacy and build manufacturing, and they're different for the different constructs. And so we'll abandon, it'll be a few $1 billion we'll waste on manufacturing for the constructs that don't get picked because something else is better. But a few billion in the situation we're in, where there's trillions of dollars, that's 1,000 times more, trillions of dollars being lost economically, it is worth it. In normal government procurement processes and understanding which are the right 7, in a few months those may kick in. But our foundation, we can get that bootstrapped and get it going and save months because every month counts. Things can reopen if we do the right things in the summer, but it won't be completely normal. You'll still be very worried. We may decide masks are important, although right now they're in short supply for health workers, so people should not go and hoard those. But the capacity of that can be brought up, so it may be something that, like China today, everybody who's walking around is wearing one of those. So we'll have a lot of unusual measures until we get the world vaccinated. 7 billion people, that's a tall order, but it is where we need to get to, despite a lot of things in between now and then to minimize the damage.
Gates openly talks about vaccinating everyone on the planet before life can return to, quote, normal. And it's not just Gates saying this. His little buddy Fauci has also implied this. The Australian Prime Minister has stated that life will not return to normal until there is a vaccine. Johnson & Johnson, who participated in the UN Gates Event 201 pandemic simulation, is preparing mass vaccines. Denmark has mandated vaccines through an emergency order. And in Italy, you may have to have a COVID pass to prove you have a marker of immunity, just to return to work after this lockdown. And right here, published on MIT News, we see MIT engineers have developed a way to store medical information underneath the skin using a quantum dot dye that is delivered along with a vaccine by a microneedle patch. The dye, which is invisible to the naked eye, can be read later using a smartphone. Now, this will not just be used for medical records. This will be used to incorporate all of aspects of your life, again, tying back into the digital ID, which is going to include all of your financial information, your credit, your social credit, your health, your medical, your location. You're going to need it to travel, to work, to buy, to sell, everything. And it's all going to be tapped into this new digital financial system, in my opinion. You can see it doesn't take a scientist to put together 2 + 2 + 2. I mean, what are your thoughts? You let me know if I'm way off on this. Now, this new digital financial system is going to, of course, be rolled out of the ashes of this global and health economic crisis. It's the perfect plan, and it's been in the works for a long time.
More now of our special coverage here tonight, life in the U.S. in 10 years' time. By that time, there may be all kinds of new ways to safeguard and identify all those things that make each of us unique, our faces, even our fingerprints, even our eyes. Here now with more on the future of technology, NBC's Tom Costello.
The year is 2017. You're rushed to a hospital unconscious with no ID or medical history, but thanks to a microchip under your skin, it's all there. Science fiction 20 years ago, but a biometric reality today.
And now there's a company called BiChip, and according to their site, BiChip is the first and only distance-readable human microchip with internet connectivity. BiChip has a unique ID for general identification and can store your medical data, driver's license, and passport. It can also be used as an alternative payment system, integratable with cryptocurrency wallets. BiChip has also created a crypto token that will be implemented in the microchips as the only payment system. You can already buy BiChip tokens here. Already have a microchip in your hand? Activate it here. And this type of technology is already being implemented.
There's an interesting conversation happening right now on our Care 11 Facebook page about microchipping. I'm not talking about microchipping your cat or your dog. I'm talking about microchipping you.
When Elias Brotberger goes to work, he doesn't need ID. And he doesn't need money. In fact, much of what he needs to get through the day is hidden right there, just below the surface, in his hand.
You like to touch it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, weird. Yeah, it's like a grain of rice.
Yeah, a grain of rice.
Embedded in his hand is a microchip that serves as his keys, his ID, and his wallet.
Yeah, it's all in chip, so I use it like to get around the building.
Buy snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's buy some snacks. Exactly. So I can't open it.
No.
Okay.
So what I need to do is I need to first blip my chip, and it will log me in, and from there I get access to the fridge.
As we can see here, Bill Gates says that digital currencies could empower the poorest, because I'm sure we can all agree that this is Bill's mission in life. And what he is talking about is the same things that the United Nations and the central banks have been talking about, and that is integrating what they call the unbanked or underbanked into the new digital financial system of control. According to this article, there are 2.5 billion people on the planet who are not currently in the banking system. This is a huge untapped market of people that they want to tax, regulate, control, and vaccinate.
So our foundation is engaged in projecting what's going to go on, the modeling. And our partner IHME is, telling each state what they should think about in terms of ventilators and capacity. Further on out, the work we're doing now to find a therapeutic, a drug to reduce the disease, to cut the deaths down. We're hopeful that even in 6 months, some of those will have been approved. But the ultimate solution, the only thing that really lets us go back completely to normal and feel good about sitting in a stadium with lots of other people, is to create a vaccine and not just take care of our country, but take that vaccine out to the global population, and so that we have vast immunity, and this thing, no matter what, isn't going to spread in large numbers.
And we can already see that the United Nations has already adopted cryptocurrencies and also blockchain technology to, quote, meet its sustainable development goals. And they are already using it to track food supply chains, like pigs, for example. Now, they are also already using blockchain to track refugees. So why wouldn't they use it to track you or me or the rest of humanity? And this brings us to FIDO, which stands for Fast Identity Online. According to their website, the FIDO Alliance is an open industry association with a focused mission: authentication standards to help reduce the world's over-reliance on passwords. Now, if you remember back in like 2005, Bill Gates said passwords are dead, and everyone's like, oh, what's he talking about? Well, in other words, they are, and they already have been working on biometrics for some time. We can already see this integrated into our daily lives just by using our fingerprints or our facial recognition to unlock our smartphones. Let's take a quick look at their board members. We have Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Visa, and many others. Their sponsor members: Chase, Fidelity, Huawei, Netflix, SoftBank, Twitter, Verizon, in addition to various governments including the US, Germany, Australia, the UK, China, and others. And right here we also see that FIDO has partnered with the United Nations and its International Telecommunications Union. And it's interesting to note that FIDO was created in 2012, the same year that the United Nations ITU, the telecommunications division, launched its International Mobile Telecommunications System, or IMT, for 2020 and beyond initiative, setting the stage for 5G rollout in 2020. This was their mission all along. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you see what I'm trying to lay out here for you. The United Nations has been quarterbacking the rollout of 5G the entire time since 2012, and everyone is on board. All of those FIDO members I mentioned previously, and wouldn't you know it, if you take a look at the ITU, the telecommunication body for the United Nations, they just happened to present Bill Gates with a special award back in 2015.
I'm honored that the International Telecommunications Union has chosen me for this prestigious award. Well, unfortunately, I'm not able to join you in person for the 150th anniversary celebration. I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about how your work contributes to a breakthrough that will improve the lives of the world's poorest over the next 15 years and beyond. That breakthrough, which Melinda and I highlighted in our annual foundation letter this year, is the use of digital banking to give the poor more control of their assets and help them transform their lives. Historically, people at the lowest income levels have had to make difficult choices about how to use their limited financial resources. That's partly because they don't have access to banks that can help them use those resources effectively. As mobile digital technologies spread to even the poorest and most remote regions of the world, we have an opportunity to reach this underserved population and bring it into the global economy with expanded access to savings accounts, lines of credit, and other financial services. For their part, financial service providers can profit from serving these customers because the marginal cost of processing digital transactions is near zero. In other words, these technologies can make the expansion of financial access a winning proposition for everyone. Now, for the world to seize this opportunity, we need the innovation and expertise of the global telecommunications industry. And that's where the ITU can play a central role. By encouraging greater technical standardization in the digital financial services sector, by improving the quality, reliability, and security of services in low-income countries, by providing a better coordination between telecommunications authorities and financial service regulators, and by advocating simpler, more intuitive mobile technologies to ensure wider use by individuals who may be illiterate or unfamiliar with digital systems.
Now, to further illustrate the UN's major role in the implementation of 5G, all we have to do is look at this World Economic Forum white paper. And of course, the World Economic Forum falls under the United Nations, and they were both at the event 201, the pandemic simulation. Now, this white paper is titled Impact of 5G, Creating New Value Across Industry and Society. The very first paragraph is very telling. The fourth industrial revolution offers the opportunity for diverse sectors to enhance their competitiveness and contribution to regional economies while supporting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This industrial revolution is powered by both established and emerging technologies, including the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, advanced data analytics, robotic process automation, augmented reality, 3D printing, and drones. One key enabler that allows these technologies to realize their full potential is connectivity. Now, this document also contains language on digital banking and digital wallets and is directly tied to the UN's 2030 Agenda and the UN's Agenda 21, which is why I state that I believe that what we are seeing right now is directly connected to my report I published just before this whole coronavirus situation unfolded, titled The UN and Central Banks, a Rockefeller-Rothschild Coup. Now, please go watch this. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to leave a link below. In addition to my very first video on my channel, The Digital Banking Arms Race is Here. Now, there is clearly an agenda tied to this crisis. Understanding this agenda will help us to understand the current situation. And I believe what we are seeing now is all connected. All of the events leading up to this crisis, all of the same players involved in every instance, everything from the Rockefeller lockstep pandemic outline a decade ago to Event 201 to the UN's climate change agenda. They have built a technocracy, which is the scientific dictatorship that Eisenhower warned us on, this very same speech where he warned us about the military-industrial complex. In my personal opinion, this is not about money. The central banks are on board with this program and they print the money out of thin air. This is about control. And when you look and dive into what these social engineers really believe is the greatest threat to humanity, it's us. It's you, it's me, it's the public. It's population growth. They are eugenicists at their core, and they have built the ultimate system of control. And they have been incrementally preparing us for this, for the Internet of Things, for the Internet of Value, for smart cities, to run on the 5G and the artificial intelligence. This is why I believe that this outbreak is not an accident. And at the end of the day, the US and China are on the same page. So it's not China's fault, it's not America's fault. That's simply a distractionary tactic of divide and conquer. But don't take my word for it. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of great researchers and journalists doing some fantastic work. James Corbett is one of them. He has some amazing, valuable information on his site. And I recommend that you watch Why Big Oil Conquered the World. This will help you better understand this eugenics global governance operation, as well as his report on China and the New World Order. Whitney Webb just came out with a fantastic report about Dark Winter, which shows how this exact scenario goes all the way back and was played out all the way back to the days of 9/11 and much more. So many others out there doing fantastic work. Richie Allen, David Icke, David Cohen, who is a doctor, Dr. David Cohen, who's raised some very valid points regarding the health impacts of 5G that everyone needs to check out. And so many others, I can't possibly name all of you. Now, I think that it's very important for all of us not to get caught up in the mindset that there's only one right answer about the coronavirus outbreak, only one right explanation regarding the source. Is it 5G? Is it a bioweapon? Nobody really knows. Is it possible that it could be a cocktail of many things? Sure, absolutely. Is it possible that 5G is making people sick? Yeah, it's possible. Just look at the negative health effects admittedly attributed to Wi-Fi, for example, and cell phone radiation. They say don't put your phone in your pocket next to your reproductive organs for a reason. Could this virus be used as cover to help conceal some of that? Absolutely, it's possible. Anything is possible right now. Now, could the coronavirus really be getting people sick? Yeah, of course, absolutely. Could there be multiple strains of this virus with different degrees of mortality? Yes, absolutely. This could explain why when you see countries like Iran are being hit so hard, much harder than other countries. Is there possible strains? Yes, after all, a global health pandemic would be the perfect cover to release a bioweapon, in my opinion. I'm just saying that we must keep an open mind and go where the evidence takes us. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Based on how these operations go in the past, they're multifaceted, they're meant to achieve multiple goals, and there's multi-layers in them. And in my opinion, from everything I've seen, this is a coordinated and planned operation. And the more I dig, the more confirmation I see. Now, remember way back at the beginning of this report when I said, remember the year 2017? Well, in 2017, Trump made a cryptic comment about the calm before the storm.
You guys know what this represents? Well, maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
Now, people speculated about this at the time, what the president meant by this, and many thought that it was perhaps connected to future military action since Trump was with top military leaders. That would make sense, right? But it's interesting to note that this is also around the same time that Trump was threatening to pull out of the UN. Remember that? He was going to pull out of the United Nations. He was threatening to cut funding to the United Nations. He was threatening to cut funding to the World Health Organization and threatening to cut funding to the CDC. Now, just a few months prior to this, Dr. Tony Fauci also made this cryptic statement.
Given, as you heard from the introduction, that I have been around for a while and have had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure of serving in 5 administrations, I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. There will be a surprise outbreak. There will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my relatively short presentation, you will understand why history the history of the last 32 years that I've been the director of NIAID will tell the next administration that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they will be faced with the challenges that their predecessors were faced with.
Now again, this is just speculation, but considering all the information that I've covered in my previous report titled Coronavirus Follow the Money, the CDC and Fauci and Bill Gates were all warning, or not, I don't want to say threatening, but they were all warning basically of a possible pandemic if their funding was cut. Now it's no smoking gun, but it is extremely interesting in my opinion, and it should be highlighted, taken into consideration. Now, for those of you who stuck around to the end, I have a little treat for you. I recently did a poll on Twitter asking people what concerns them more, North Korea, Iran, or Bill Gates. More than 2,200 people voted and participated in this online Twitter poll, and a whopping 88.8% said Bill Gates was a much larger concern to them over North Korea and Iran. So what does that tell you? Now, please be sure to share this report, share it far and wide, help to get this information out there. You can follow my work right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and like. You can also follow me on BitChute because they could take down this YouTube channel at any time. I'm honestly shocked that it's still up, that they haven't, because I have not been pulling any punches. I'm just telling it as it is. I'm not, anyways, you guys know what's up. You can also follow me on Twitter and activist posts. Stay tuned for more. I'm Spiro. Thanks for watching.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world.
Never before has a new world order had to be assembled from so many different perceptions, or on so global a scale. Nor has any previous order had to combine the attributes of the historic balance of power system with global democratic opinion and the exploding technology of the contemporary period.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
I think his task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity. It isn't just a crisis.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges.